Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of Ville on the Ville. There is plenty to talk about this week from, of course, the basketball season for the men wrapping up, the women's season continuing, the coaching search full steam ahead right after the season ended, baseball team moving along, football spring practice. So we'll jump right into it and starting off with the basketball team dropping a game to Mississippi State, ending their season Tuesday night in the NIT. And I think most fans thought that Louisville should win that game, move on to the Final Four in New York. But it really did not go any way the way many of us thought it was going to go. They were dominated by Mississippi State, really from start to finish. The Bulldogs thoroughly dominated the Cardinals. And really, when you look at why that happened, not really sure. Some word got out that maybe the players started to know that David Padgett was not going to be retained. Maybe that was an effect. I'm not really sure, but the NIT ultimately, when I look back on this, the fact that they got into that tournament, they decided to play, even though initially they said they didn't want to participate. I think ultimately, and I touched on this in one of my quick takes last week, playing in the NIT was a very positive experience following a overall disappointing season. Now, they certainly had some good moments, getting that road win at Florida State, going up to Notre Dame and getting the first win there in a quarter century. Really allowed David to have something to hang his hat on and give the players something positive. But in terms of overall, when you look back on the season, the fact that they did not reach the NCAA tournament, I think most people felt going into the season, despite all the circumstances surrounding everything, they would still reach the tournament. And since they didn't, obviously disappointing. But the NIT, I think that experience, really looking back, that's going to be something we look back on and say, you know, the decision to play in that could have really been a huge factor in allowing this program to get turned around or get back to where it was much quicker than had they not participated. And my point there is, you saw guys, Darius Perry's dunk, for example, Jordan Nwora having an outstanding game against Middle Tennessee, Ryan McMahon shooting lights out in the same game. Those moments and that crowd that got in there, an outstanding crowd. The energy was fantastic, unlike really any they had seen outside of really any other game this year, maybe except for the Virginia game. That energy and enthusiasm, I think, really gave them something positive to take from. And you looked at that Mississippi State game, despite the fact that they were really dominated much of the game, many of the fans stayed right till the end, gave them a standing ovation as they left the court. And that encouragement, I think, is going to go a long way. When these guys have to make a decision, of course, we know Honest is moving on. We know Q is moving on. But then you've got Ray Spalding and Ding Adele. Many of those freshmen who their playing time was hit and miss. It was sporadic. 1 week they looked like they were going to be the next big contributor on the team, and then they wouldn't play for 2 weeks. So that inconsistency in them playing in games, how was that going to affect their willingness to come back, to stick it out? And I think that NIT experience really gave them something positive to look back on, and maybe when they have to make that decision, maybe they decide they want to stick it out. Now, of course, some questions still have to be answered, and mainly that will be who the coach will be moving forward. But I think looking back, I'm going to really be interested to see a couple years from now who sticks around. And let's ask them why they stuck around. Did that NIT appearance, did that positivity, did that help influence you to come back and remain a Louisville Cardinal versus going pro or testing the waters in the NBA or overseas or transferring? I think the transfer thing now, that's a difficult decision because you're talking about having to sit out. I don't think they're going to get a special waiver just because the coach changes. Those circumstances that Louisville are facing from the penalties and sanctions and other things with the FBI investigation, I don't think any special waivers are going to be in place for them to transfer and not have to sit out. I know some voting was done to maybe change that rule, but I don't think that's gone into effect yet. So that's something that's still a serious consideration. So moving forward, I think that NIT experience is going to be a huge factor for this Louisville program. And I think all of us, the players, coaches, and of course the fans included, are glad that they took part in it. I think many of us might have wanted them to go ahead and get to New York, a little more positive experience. However, when you talk about the way things are progressing now in terms of getting a new coach, that's where you say, well, maybe it was better that they went ahead and lost. And of course, on Wednesday afternoon, it was announced that David Padgett would not be retained as Louisville's coach. A very quick move there by Vince Tyree, and I think that indicates that they want to move quickly. They may have been already moving for the past couple months when they kind of knew that David Padgett was not going to be the guy. And I think David himself knew that as well. When you look back on that post-game presser from the Mississippi State game, and you saw David Padgett in that post-game presser, most of the times you see coaches and players, they kind of hang their head. They're disappointed the season's over. They regret some things they did. And I think you saw some of that from David Padgett, but I think what you also saw, I saw relief. I mean, I don't know if everybody else out there will agree with me, but what I saw from David was I saw smiles, and I saw just a sense of pressure off of his shoulders, because I think ultimately there are a lot of people out there that are very disappointed that David Padgett's not going to be the guy, or not going to even get consideration to be the guy. But I think David himself, I think people that are disappointed need to understand that David himself, I think, understands totally that this is not the job for him right now. It's a little out of his league. He needs to hone his craft, if you will. He needs to get that experience at another level. And by doing this for Louisville for this season, the challenge he took on, and he did it, as I said the other day in my quick take, he didn't do this to fast track his career. He did this because he loves Louisville. He loved those players, and he took on a challenge that he knew was going to be very difficult. So we have to thank him immensely. He led this program with absolute class. You know, that experience did hurt him and probably this team's chances of getting to the NCAA tournament, but he led them with class. And I think, as I said the other day, that's what this program needed more than anything. They needed a person leading the program, the face of the program, to be total class, total honesty, and totally upfront with everything they said. And from day one, David Padgett provided nothing but class. And I think that is a huge thing for this program to instantly, when all those changes were made back in September, they needed a positive force leading the program. And David Padgett absolutely did that. And he did it, all the way up until that last press conference on Wednesday afternoon, when he sat down and had just learned that he was not going to be retained. I think he knew that. Like I said, I don't think he was surprised. And I think ultimately he knows that it's not best for Louisville or for him to be the coach moving forward. But David Padgett, could not thank him enough. The love the fans have for him, it started 10 years ago. It continues even stronger today. I will never be able to thank him enough for everything he's done for this program. Trent Johnson, Greg Paulus, they came in, something they knew was probably temporary, going to be short-term, but I wish them nothing but the best. I know Trent Johnson got a lot of grief for his lack of enthusiasm at times, but that's just Trent Johnson. I mean, he was a steadying force, and maybe that's something David Padgett needed. David Padgett was probably, outwardly you may not have seen it, but inside he might have been a bit of an emotional basket case going through what he was going through. Maybe Trent Johnson, because he's a longtime family friend of the Padgetts, maybe that helped David along the way in terms of the things he was going through, and having Trent Johnson there. So we can't thank all those guys enough. They came to this program and helped it out when it really needed it. And I think moving forward, David Padgett now, like I said, even though he didn't do this to fast track his career, I think he absolutely has done that. This experience is going to allow him now to get a job at a level he is more comfortable at, that he can take, learn the coaching ranks along the way, improve himself, and then, again, 10, 15 years from now, who knows? He comes up through the ranks, he moves his way up, he gets that experience, he becomes one of the hottest names in the game, maybe right at a time when Louisville is once again looking for their next head coach. And at that point, I don't think anybody would have a problem whatsoever with a very experienced David Padgett coming back to the University of Louisville to lead them as the head coach. So David Padgett, class all the way from day one right up until that last press conference, and can't thank him enough for everything he did for Louisville basketball. And I think moving forward, the program will impact the program greatly for years to come. Now, the coaching search, and that same day that David Padgett was announced he would not be retained, Vince Tyree came right out with a press conference and saying, we're not going to waste time. We're getting right into this. I am of the belief, and I think many others are as well, they've already kind of started this coaching search. I think there was some concern after this Vince Tyree press conference that you can't rush into this coaching hire. You need to make a good decision. You can't just hire a guy right away just to hire them. Well, I'm pretty confident that they've probably been going over things for the past 1 or 2 months in terms of identifying candidates, contacting people initially, knowing they were going to need to make a hire and do it quickly. You can't sit on this hire. You can't hire a guy in the middle of the summer. At that point, you've crippled your program. You've basically almost given it a death penalty. Louisville has no recruits for next year, and they have to hope that some of these guys on the team now are going to stay. Otherwise, if you talk about not having any recruits and having guys leave, then you're basically giving yourself a death penalty. So Louisville had to act quickly, and I think they have been acting for the past several weeks to move forward. And it was announced shortly after, Wednesday was the press conference. Vince Tyree said we're going to move quickly. And on Thursday it was announced that Louisville would be meeting with Chris Mack this weekend, and that meeting is reportedly going to happen on Saturday. And you would think that this meeting is coming after some contact and some talk has already taken place. So is this meeting something to just, cross some T's and dot some I's just to kind of wrap things up? Or is this really an initial meeting to gauge interest? I'm of the belief that they've already been in contact in some manner. Maybe representatives from Louisville and Chris Mack have talked and, passed on information between each other in that way. But I have a hard time thinking this is the first contact between the two. And I think a lot of people now are of the belief that next week you're not only going to have a head coach announcement, but you're also going to have Vince Tyree announce perhaps first that he will be the permanent athletic director. I don't think that's a decision anybody has a problem with. I think he has shown the ability. I've been very impressed, as I was impressed with David Padgett from day one. Going back to the first time I heard Vince Tyree, the week of the NC State football game on the road, he came on, went on the radio, did some interviews. Been very impressed with what he's brought to the table and his ability to lead. Yes, he doesn't have a lot of experience in sports administration, but he has a lot of business experience. And let's be honest, that's just as important, being able to lead and have those business qualities and understanding of finances. That goes a long way to, running what is basically a multi-million-dollar corporation when you're talking about major college athletics. I think Vince Tyree has that. Obviously, the love he has for the University of Louisville should not be questioned. I know he played baseball at Kentucky, but he did that because that was really his only opportunity at the time. I think if Louisville had that opportunity or had a more significant program at the time like they do now, he would have certainly opted for Louisville. I don't think anybody should question the fact that he played baseball at Kentucky. I think his love and his number one is the University of Louisville and will continue to be that way. So I think we're going to see him named the permanent AD, and I think most people are going to be perfectly happy with that. Now, is Chris Mack going to be the coach, and should we be happy with him? The popular thing I've heard now this past week, now that Chris Mack's name is the name that people are saying is going to be the next coach at Louisville, and Vince Tyree had said, we're going to go after an elite coach. And people started to say, was Chris Mack really an elite coach at this point? And I know the popular opinion right now is, well, no. I mean, when you talk about an elite coach currently right now, of course, Rick Pitino was. He's no longer in there, and he's certainly not an option for Louisville. But Mike Krzyzewski, Roy Williams, Jay Wright, all these names, Brad Stevens and Billy Donovan at the NBA level, are any of those coaches, yes, they're elite, but are they even on the table? Many would think no for this Louisville position. So who is elite? I'm not sure if you can really classify Chris Mack as elite. I think Vince Tyree, when he said that, I think he was talking about coaches that would be available and be considered the best candidates. And I think that's kind of what he meant by saying elite. So I think going after Chris Mack, I don't think should be a concern for Louisville fans that he's not an elite coach. I think he's considered one of the best up-and-coming coaches. He's established himself at Xavier, several years of very successful runs. Of course, this year, upset by Florida State. But Florida State, they're still moving right along. They're now in the Elite Eight, knocked off a good Gonzaga team. We saw what they could do. They showed at times that they can compete with anybody in the country, a lot like Louisville. When they're dialed in and focused, they have athletes. They have great length. They can cause a lot of problems for teams, a big matchup problem. So when they're playing well, they're not an easy out, and they're showing that now in the tournament. They're getting good matchups. I think against Xavier, that length and athleticism maybe caused some problems. So I don't think you should be all that concerned that he couldn't get Xavier by Florida State. At times, Rick Pitino had trouble with Florida State, and many other programs have as well, North Carolina and Duke. So I don't think that one game people should judge Chris Mack on that. And also, he's shown that he can consistently get Xavier into good runs in the NCAA tournament. Now, I think the concern from others as well, he has a lot of double-digit losing seasons in what was an A10. Now they moved to the Big East, which is certainly a much better conference. So is he going to be able to translate his style of play to the ACC and really be successful on another level and have seasons where he doesn't have double-digit losses? And really, to be honest, I can't answer that question. I think it comes down to when he moves to Louisville, can he use that platform to recruit a higher caliber athlete? He's gotten some good classes at Xavier over the past few years, but can he continue that at Louisville, or can he even take it to another level, given the fact that he's at this program, which is, despite what some want to say, is still on another level from what Xavier offers in terms of the conference, in terms of the facilities, in terms of the overall support through financial support and through the fan base. Can he use that platform to take it to another level? I think defense has been another concern. His defenses haven't been what Louisville fans are used to seeing, a top 20 consensus defense. His defenses have been upwards of 30, 40, 50th ranked in the country. Now, has that been because they've played in conferences against teams like Creighton and Butler and Villanova, who like to, play. They're very efficient offensive teams. Maybe that comes into play. Who knows? But I think, again, when you talk about moving to Louisville, can he just take his overall game, if you will, as a coach to that next level? And I think you have to trust that he can if you're hiring him to come and be Louisville's head coach. Some other names I think some people have thrown out. Musselman from Nevada. That scares me because I don't want to fall in love with a guy for a one quick run. Of course, they lost to Loyola of Chicago, so they're out now. But they won 2 NCAA tournament games by the narrowest of margins in which they both trailed by double digits. They could have very easily been out in the first round. So, when I look at Musselman, I'm not saying he's not a young coach that could have a future in the game, but I don't think you're ready to put a program like Louisville in the hands of somebody who's really only shown success through a couple of really fortunate performances in the NCAA tournament against teams that really weren't all that high a quality. So I was a little hesitant on that one. Shaka Smart's another name. I'm mixed on Shaka Smart. I think the style of play certainly would fit Louisville. I think he's been recruiting well, although people point to his numbers at Texas. They have not been good. He moved to Texas. You have the improved facilities. You have the improved financial support. And he just really has, overall, you'd say, been disappointing in the seasons he's put out there in Austin. But at the same time, they've had a bit of bad luck in terms of what they've had with their players being injured. The guy this year, the young man who came in with cancer, and he still got him to the NCAA tournament and really should have won that game, many say, in the first round. So it's hard for me to really gauge Shaka Smart on, has his game just dropped off? Is he not able to perform at this level? Or is it a combination of just some tough luck with recruits and injuries or the other? I'm not really sure. I would probably be okay with that. Now he has a massive buyout. That could be an issue. Now, who knows what his contract says? Maybe there's a clause in the buyout that says if it's Louisville, it's a lower amount. You don't know that. At the time his contract at Texas was written, Rick Pitino didn't look like he was going anywhere. So maybe Texas would have said, hey, sure, your own buyout's only $2 million. If Louisville opens up, it's not going to open up. And now it is. I'm just totally speculating there, but maybe that's something. The only reason his name has come up is that maybe somebody knows that there's an out, that he could be an option for Louisville. But make no mistake, I think Chris Mack, based on all the reports, and these reports go back several months, I think his name has been on the radar really from the time all of this started and it looked like a new coach would be hired. Chris Mack's name was the first name that came up. Now, was it just because of those connections? I'm not sure. His wife being from Louisville. Some of you may not know that. Sarcasm. But he certainly, I think, is the name at the top of the list. And I think by Monday, we'll know. Is it going to be Chris Mack or are we moving on? And hopefully we'll know soon after that if that is the case. So we'll see moving forward. A lot's going to happen, I think, in the next week. And really, it has to happen. Vince Tyree said, I want to have a decision made before the Final Four. And he hopes to have his coach out there with Louisville stuff on in front of the media, showing everybody the Louisville brand and kind of rebuilding and starting anew for Louisville men's basketball. Now, women's basketball. They're moving on in the Sweet 16 tonight in Rupp Arena. 9-something is when they're going to take on the Stanford Cardinal. Jeff Walz not holding back in his displeasure with the time slot given to the women's team. Of course, the TV executives will argue, we want more eyeballs on our broadcast. I'm not buying that. This is women's basketball. It's not a huge draw anywhere. I mean, that's just blatantly, that's the truth. And I have a hard time thinking that putting Louisville at 9:30 is going to make that much of a difference for the people watching that game. Maybe it is. I don't have the numbers in front of me. I just think I'm very skeptical when especially Jeff Walz said himself, all the other number one seeds got the early game. So why are we getting the late game? We're supposed to be awarded through the season we had by giving that preferential game. And if you're trying to get more people into women's basketball, that starts by getting them to the games. And I know, again, you want TV, eyeballs from TV on there as well. But I think if you grow that through people going to the games first, then you get a greater TV draw down the road. But again, TV controls everything. They were given that time, and hopefully the fans will still get down there to Rupp Arena, turn Rupp red, and cheer on the only remaining team that we have going here in the postseason. Stanford, while of course you would think Louisville is a heavy favorite and they should win this game, no question. Stanford has played a very, very challenging schedule, including, I think they've played, UConn. They played Ohio State. They played UCLA, several ranked teams. Now, they haven't won any of those games. They've lost most of them by double digits, but they are well tested. So Louisville's not going to bring anything to the table that they have not seen in terms of high-caliber opponents. So I don't think you're going to see a team in Stanford that backs down. So I think Louisville, needs to come out dialed in and focused. I think at this point in the season, when you hear Jeff Walz talk, I heard him speak before the tournament even started, and he was really concerned about the second round game that was going to come up and ended up being against Marquette. I think his concern, when you hear him talk, he knows when his team is taking on a big name that they're probably going to be dialed in. But I think his concern starts when they're playing these teams he knows are capable of beating Louisville, but the players may not be as focused on the opponent because the name isn't as big. And I think this is probably a game that he's more concerned or as concerned about than he will be with Baylor, who is most likely going to be the next team they play. They will know before they tip off who their next opponent will be in the Elite Eight, because Baylor will take on Oregon State in the first game down in Rupp. But it's not going to be easy. Stanford, like I said, very well tested. So hopefully the women come out focused, dialed in, and that offense, again, is clicking and moving, because that's when they get stagnant. That offense just is not moving the ball, not passing well. They get a little sloppy. You saw that in the second half a little bit against Marquette, but the first half was so good and so focused and dialed in that they just got out to a huge lead. So the game slippage, typically when you get up 30 points, in the neighborhood of 30 points, that game slippage is to be expected to some degree. They never really were challenged by Marquette after that terrific first half. So hopefully we'll see that again. Come out, strong first half, kind of put things away and get control of this game early, and that way they can start to even focus on Baylor before this game even ends. Let's be honest, they need to come out focused, because if they don't, I think this game could really be a problem, because this is a Stanford team that has taken on a lot of very, very good opposition this year, and they're not going to come out intimidated whatsoever by Louisville, despite the fact that they're playing in what should be a sizable home court advantage for the Cardinals. So hopefully best of luck to Jeff Walz and the women as they take on the Stanford. The Cardinals and the Cardinal. Let's see if the announcers get that right, because anymore it seems like every time I watch a Louisville game, the announcer says the Louisville Cardinal. I don't know why that's become just habit of all these different announcers, and why they're doing that, I don't know. So do they call the Cardinal the Cardinals? I'll be curious to know that tonight when that game airs down there in Lexington. So best of luck to them as they hope to move on in that Baylor game. If they get to that to me, when I saw that line, that's what I feared, that they were going to stick Baylor in Louisville's region. And really, I spoke to this aggravation before, Notre Dame, a 1 seed, which really surprises me. Louisville beat them twice. They got a 1 seed and then got the easier 2 seed in their region. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Louisville should have gotten that more preferential placement with the 2 seed, but nonetheless, it is what it is. You deal with the late play time, you deal with Baylor in your region, and you just try to beat who they put in front of you. Now, the baseball team, they are in action this evening against Clemson. They dropped a series against Wake Forest last week, a tough one. They were in a game that was 1-1 going into the 9th inning, and in the top of the 9th, they had the bases loaded, just 1 out, and they hit into a double play. And in the bottom of the 9th, Wake Forest gets a walk-off solo home run to win that Friday game. Louisville came back strong on Saturday, but then dropped the Sunday game in the decider, so they dropped a series in the ACC. They turned around and got a midweek win over Western Kentucky, in which they trailed for much of the game. It kind of went back and forth, and they finished strong in that to get the win over the Toppers. But the top 10 Clemson team first pitch here in less than 2 hours, 6 o'clock. So this is a big series for Louisville. 1-1 so far in the ACC, so they need to hold serve at home against these good quality ACC opponents. So they'll get that off, hopefully get off to a good start here tonight. The weather should be good tonight. Now Saturday is going to be nasty almost all day, so you're looking at a possible doubleheader on Sunday from the way it looks right now, because I think pretty much all day Saturday is going to be a massive washout. So there could be a lot of baseball to come Sunday afternoon at Jim Patterson Stadium. And lastly, spring football obviously well underway. All the practices are closed, so there's not a lot of analysis that can be done. You're just going to have to wait for that spring game on April 14th. But what the university has done, the football program has done, I think because the practices are closed, is they have a website, and you see it there at the bottom, University of Louisville Football.life. You go to that website, and they're providing updates and just some insight into what's going on in the practices. So that's a neat little kind of a carrot that they're throwing out there to the fans who might not like the idea of not being able to get out to the closed practices. And Bobby Petrino spoke to why they're doing that. He says he'd love to have the practices open for the fans, but when you do that, you get people out there, and all they do is report on the players that aren't participating, the ones that are hurt. And I guess that he just doesn't like the fact that they're going to get information like that out, that Louisville then, or their opponents, might be able to say, oh, these guys may not be around in the fall when the actual games take place. Is that actually the case? I don't know. I know Bobby Petrino was meticulous when it comes to preparation, and what he wants to do. And I think he likes to control a lot of those things. And so I'm really not all that surprised that he closes these practices. Now, I do have an issue with I think the spring game last year, they did not allow any cameras in to shoot highlights. I'm not a big fan of that. That's something for the fans, I know, but also, the media, at some point, you have to reach out to the media and let them do some of their job to cover your program. And hopefully this year they'll allow some more extensive coverage of the spring game, but we'll see. I haven't heard anything yet as far as that goes, but if they do allow people out there, I hope to be out there and getting what I will be permitted to get of spring football. But if you go to that website, I got a screenshot of it here. That's kind of what it looks like. It's just you go there and you need to click on little updates, and it's just Bobby Petrino kind of going down and talking about what happened in practice that day and giving you just some insight on what's going on. So that was at least a nice gesture if they're not going to have the practices open to allow fans to get out there and see on the website there what the football team is up to. And of course, the big thing is, is Puma Pass, how is he going to develop? Of course, we really won't know until, other than seeing these updates on the website. I'm excited to see what he looks like. I think this offense for Louisville this year, and not that it wasn't incredible with Lamar Jackson, but I think with Juwan Pass at quarterback, not that he isn't an athlete. He's a fantastic athlete, but he's just a different kind of quarterback. He's huge. I'm not sure if Louisville has ever had a quarterback as far as a stature like Juwan Pass brings to the table. I think Hunter Cantwell was as tall, maybe slightly taller, but he did not have the frame that Pass has. He is simply almost a Cam Newton-like, at least when he was in college. That's how big he is. So it's going to be interesting to see what sort of offense Bobby Petrino goes with. I think you're going to see more of the Petrino offense from when he was here the first time. If Puma is comfortable enough to run that, you could see a lot of that tight end action that we haven't seen nearly as much of in Bobby Petrino's second stint here at Louisville. So we'll see. I mean, I'm kind of, it's exciting. Of course, you'd love to still have Lamar Jackson because of everything he could do. But at the same time, I think it's going to be very interesting to see what Bobby Petrino now does with a more traditional running game. You heard for the last couple of years they were going to do more of that traditional running, but I think when push came to shove, you got back to a lot of that read option stuff. So that's one of the primary things that I want to see because you're going to have some talent there at running back, even though some of it's very young. A lot of guys in the stable there to hand the ball off to. So I'm interested to see how that looks for Louisville football here this spring. I'm going to wrap things up right here for this episode of Ville on the Ville. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. And again, hit me up on Twitter if you have any questions. I did receive some good news that it's very possible in the very near future that these podcasts will be available in a different form, in a more widespread form of media. I can't go into details quite yet, but I hope to have some updates here as we move closer to spring ball and as baseball season continues. This has been Ville on the Ville. As always, go Cards.